Here we're looking at an ancient Natuffian burial. It's a burial style that's seen across the Middle East, the eastern seaboard of the Mediterranean around through, even seen in such things as Jericho burials, and the earliest burials that we can find of Nakata cultures and stuff around Egypt are also extremely similar, where this pit was dug and a person is set off to one side a little bit, crouched up in a fetal position facing to the east or the west. Definitely aligned north to south though in most situations. If you look around here, you'll see a whole lot of turtle shells. People were very fond of eating turtles back then. In fact, it led into a modern day. The reason that we never got a taxonomy or an actual live tortoise into England or anywhere in the ancient of times, whenever they would go and find them in such places, the Galapagos Island and places, even involving Darwin himself, was that the people would eat them. They even went there and knowing the fact they grabbed a whole lot of them and still never could seem to get back with one where it wasn't eaten. It said that it tastes like buttery chicken and was irresistible. And the people starving on a ship and eating tack and whatever they could get from the islands to head back from, and maybe fish they could catch along the voyage, it really seemed irresistible, staring them right there in the eyes. This burial has a few other things that are connected to it. One thing that you can notice is that draped across her body, she's known as a shaman because of these artifacts that are connected with her. But draped across her body is actually a eagle's wing. And we've made connections before how an eagle's wing is a connective. We still have connections today whenever someone passes away and they are born into heaven on the wings of the angels or the wings of eagles. It's even spoken of in the Bible and so on. One real weird oddity, and we'll get into it when we get into this, is that there's a foot right there in the center of the picture that was chopped off above the ankle of somebody, and it is not hers. And it's there. She's apparently an important person to that civilization that was there, and she has an elaborate burial for the time. Let's look into this a little bit more. Is this the first feast? The burial at the Hilazon Tachtit cave site. Excavation at the 12,000-year-old Hilazon Tachtit site, located in what is now Israel, led to an astonishing discovery. At the cave site, 29 Natuffian individuals are buried. 28 of these burials took place in a collective pit, but one burial was special. A woman believed to be a shaman was buried separately, with evidence that a pre-burial feast took place in her honor, providing the earliest known evidence of a feast in honor of a woman's burial at the time. This looking out here is looking out the cave entrance from here across the valley where they have found it at, and here you can see the excavation that's done in the first part of it here. Natuffian archaeological excavation of the site of Hilazon Tachtit in the Galilee area of northern Israel, where the archaeologists found the 12,000-year-old skeleton of a female shaman. The Natuffians were an Epipaleolithic culture dating back between 13,000 and 9,800 BC, found around the eastern Mediterranean. The Natuffians were a sedentary hunter-gatherer culture who had some agriculture, who lived in gathered communities. Some evidence indicates that they cultivated barley and wheat and that they created tools specifically for harvesting of crops. This indicates a transmission in human civilization from the hunter-gatherer to a farming society, and it'll look like the Natuffians are heralds of this situation, and they actually connect back to the people of Göbekli Tepe and Catalhoyuk and so on, and also through this whole area at the time. Amazingly, we look and they're hooked up to all these crop circles that we have found, and I did a recent video on, from ancient Anatolia, thousands of them, all the way through the Black Desert of Jordan that they talk about them being in often, but even in the article it talks about the thousands of them being strode from there across and through Yemen. But in that video I showed you, there's some of those same circles leading down and past Egypt and all the way into the Cape of South Africa. And the reason why people aren't really looking into that more is that they probably realize it has connections to this and don't want to embarrass both sides. One with an idea of course, still going with a biblical timeline, and the other one with the fact that there were modern humans building all these civilizations around, even in sub-Saharan Africa, where we would think the Khoisan existed at this time. The separate burial of the Shaman woman raised many questions about the functioning of the Natuffian culture. The woman was estimated to be 45 years old. Her spine and pelvis were deformed, indicating she had walked with a limp. Within the burial pit, the woman was surrounded by 71 tortoise shells, cattle bones, a wing bone from a golden eagle, 2 marten skulls, which is a type of bird, a leopard's pelvis, and a human foot. Now that's odd there, but they tell you that she had scoliosis and things going on with her, and that she had walked with a limp. She had 71 tortoise shells, and if that had 72, we would all know what that had to do with, but only 71. There's one that's missing somehow, but were there that many people that came to her funeral? Was the whole of the community that's there involved? So this wing of a golden eagle, even cattle bones, 2 marten skulls, and this ancient bird cult that went on during that time that we talked about, and how the birds would take you to the afterlife, and that's what that eagle's connective has to do with. An actual leopard's pelvis for power, and then a human foot. I personally believe that in some way, because of her deformed foot and walking with a limp, that they tried to fix that for her in the afterlife by giving her another human foot. I have no idea if somebody in the community decided to give up their foot and put it in her burial, so it would go along with her if that person was sacrificed totally, or if he just lost his foot and then they cauterized it in some way and that man lived on with crutches, or how this would go. Was he a captured other person that they didn't know and they used that for her foot? Is it a man's foot, a woman's foot? Does her foot that corresponds with that same foot show a problem that it was the major portion of the limp, and so they took this person's foot to replace her own, almost like a prosthetic? To highlight the woman's status, the shells and other items were placed strategically throughout the barrel. A tortoise shell was placed under the woman's head, with the remaining shells arranged under her pelvis and around her body. So here's another depiction of it, and all the tortoise shells that are going around it. But right here, there was a human foot that was put in. Now her legs are somewhat deformed here, and they showed it, and then she has like scoliosis problem that they recognized, and it's all from this limp that she had. And I still say that that foot is trying to protect her and fix her from her limp. She's reaching out, and outside of her hand are those 2 marten skulls of death, and then draped across her body here was that eagle's wing that's there. Draped across her shoulder was the forearm of a wild boar, and that's a sign of power and symbology. There's a wild cow tail there that's 2, and that's another shaman symbology that goes with the master of beasts and all of that, and rebirth. And at this time, Taurus would have started coming on strong and things too, so it might have connections with that too. But you also had a fragmented basalt bowl that was found right there. So they were giving away important artifacts with her. I don't know if they found any pot with her or any things that are like poultices or anything that she could have been using in her shaman. But expert contends that the presence of these items within the burial pit indicates more than just a ritualistic use of animal parts, and that the evidence strongly suggests that a feast took place in the woman's honor prior to her burial. The breaking of the tortoise shells would have made the meat easily accessible. The burn marks indicated that the meat had been roasted The cattle bones coming from the head, neck, and limbs and feet showed clear signs of being cut or butchered. Some argue, however, that this evidence does not indicate a feast or any significance to the burial, but that it may have been merely a communal meal based on the animal remains within the burial site. It's estimated that there had been at least 17 kilograms of cattle and tortoise meat, or enough to feed at least 35 people. Nevertheless, the presence of a large meal does not necessarily indicate a feast of importance. I find that strange. Maybe they're trying to say it in two different ways. Listen, have you been to a funeral lately? Because everyone that I've been to involves people going to get something to eat as a together group after the fact, usually like the wake type situation that you would have or something like that. So it seems that they sure had a feast that was going along with her burial here, and it looks like it correlates pretty well to concepts that we even still probably can understand today. Let's see if I can get back down to this after having to reload. The possibility that feasting took place during this burial nearly 12,000 years ago indicates important cultural changes that had been taking place. During this transition in time, human and civilization, the presence of a shaman indicates organized religion concepts. The great time and effort that went into the burial show that the woman was of great importance to the society, and the animal remains are evidence of her spiritual connection with healing objects and creatures. It has been said that the presence of the eagle wing within the burial is strong evidence that the woman was a shaman. The eagle wing represents flight to the other world or the afterlife, like I've shown you before. This suddenly reminds me of another video I did about a year and a half ago where one of the oldest musical instruments ever found was a flute bone made out of a swan, and it's attached to a burial. It's not too far from this area that's right here. Whether this petite woman was a shaman or not is clear that her burial has held a special significance to these Natuffian people. Feast or no feast, her burial within a pit separate from the communal grave and the presence of a great number of well-arranged animal parts show that whatever role she played within that community was considered an important one. Further study of this ancient grave may unlock additional secrets about this unique burial, and actually finding a few more of situations where they have the shaman buried and correlating data between 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 of these, you'd be able to make a lot more connections. And then theory would probably get put aside for the fact of what it really was. Let me know what you think downstairs about it, but we've talked about these same people quite a bit. They're part of the portion that made up early pre-dynastic Egypt. They're part of the people that made up the early part of the Holy Land. They're part of the people that brought forth civilization to humanity. Perhaps again. Peace.